Hello and welcome to Entertainment of Excellence, the podcast where we talk about films, TV, all of it. Hi, I'm Ken.
I'm Oppenheimer.
Barbie.
And today we're reviewing the 2023 phenomenon that is Barbenheimer, which will contain spoilers.
Yeah, that sounds good. Oh, well. What a day at the cinema that was. That we all did together in the same
Yeah, you
place.
definitely came with
yeah.
us. You didn't go off on your own, you evil little man.
I didn't do it a day before or anything like that. But although that actually, yes, I'm lying. I did do it a day before in a different place. This gives us an interesting topic of discussion for Barbenheimer because I watched Oppenheimer and then Barbie, but you two watched Barbie and then Oppenheimer, which makes the
Personally,
order of
I think
reviewing
yours
this
is blasphemy.
difficult.
It's literally called
I
Barbenheimer.
think yours is blasphemy.
You go
Exactly,
Barbie.
it's got Barbie
Then
first.
Oppenheimer.
It's not Oppeny.
Yeah, but you need time after the cinema to truly digest Barbie. You know, you need to be able to sit and stew on Barbie rather than having to be rushed into a
Yeah,
cinema.
you do that while
after it,
watching
you know.
Oppenheimer.
Okay. Well, I guess
Let's take a vote.
should we start with a vote?
I think
starting
Barbie
with
first.
Barbie or Oppenheimer. I think review Barbie first. I'm happy with that.
Ooh, we've changed
Okay,
mind
we'll
over it.
take that for now. Review Barbie first. So, yeah, give us a synopsis, Tom.
Oh, okay. So Barbie, she's in a Barbie world. In a Barbie world.
And she's a Barbie girl as well. Don't
In a
forget
Barbie
that.
world, yeah. And everything is perfect until, oh no, she has cellulite and thinks about death. And she's like, what the heck's going on? So then she consults the weird Barbie and she's like, you gotta go to the real world and fix your connection with the person playing with you. And then she does go to the real world. And then Ken discovers the patriarchy and he's like, this is sick. And then they reconnect with the person playing with her, but it's not the daughter, it's the mum who was trying to reconnect with her past. And then they go back to Barbieland. Then Ken instates patriarchy. And then Will Ferrell is there. And then the Kens fight, but the Barbies do the Supreme Court and also deprogram the Barbies, which is a great bit when the Barbies are deprogramming. There's some top-notch lines, and then the Barbies save the day, and then Barbie gets genitals. And I think that's all the synopsis that's really needed.
Yeah.
None of what I said was a lie. You know,
I only just
all
realised
true.
that she got genitals because I know the whole gynecologist bit at the end. But I was like, oh wait, of course she didn't have genitals before. So
no, they literally mentioned that.
I must. You're not exactly one to talk about genitals, Tom. After missing the nipples in every film we've ever watched.
See, this is why you should watch Barbie second, so that you can really stew on the ending. But because you were thrust into Oppenheimer, you didn't realise these subtleties.
Well,
you know,
get wrecked.
Okay, well, should we talk about what we actually thought of Barbie? Because I thoroughly enjoyed it. I thought it was so fun. It was genuinely funny. Like the whole opening sequence, I was just grinning the whole time. I was like, "Ee!" That's. I'm hoping that for audio listeners, that noise conveys a grin. And there's just great jokes. Love Alan, who's just there, and all the Barbies doing their thing, like where she goes down the slide and then the water is just not actually water, and she stands up. The perfect like waffle post popping out of the toaster, like Wallace and Gromit style. Just saying, everyone having the same name, I don't care. It is funny.
It is quite funny, actually. Yeah.
Yeah, and there's just so many great quips, and I've forgotten all of them now, and it's really upsetting me.
Yeah, so have I.
Oh, the one in the start, the president, the interview with Barbie says to the president, Barbie, "Oh, what makes you so amazing?" And then President Barbie says, "No comment." And it's like, but seriously, no comment. That bit's funny, and you should watch it because it's funny.
It is a legitimately funny movie, and I mean, saying that as a 20-year-old man who might not have been the key demographic for this movie, that's really saying something. I just thought it was good. It was funny. There was some really good lines, really good characters, really good vibe and aesthetic. I mean, like if you think of Barbie dolls and the Barbie adverts and everything, and you think, how would this translate to a live action movie? They just nailed it. I mean, I know this is going to go down amongst some of the more hardcore Barbie stans as blasphemy, but I'd say it's even better than some of the animated Barbie movies from the 2000s.
Oh my god, that's a big statement.
How dare you? You're smearing Princess Charm School there.
The thing is, obviously, it isn't a flawless film, but I think it so perfectly captures like what it was going for and not taking itself too seriously. And if you like get on board with the tone, and just go in trying to enjoy it, I think it for the most part, it like fully succeeds in that respect, especially the start.
Yeah, I'm so happy with the direction that this took, because it feels like they genuinely gave Greta Gerwig like loads of freedom to just whatever she wanted, like to portray. I mean, there's some problems that we'll get into later, but to be able to just portray Mattel as like this absolutely drab, dreary, man-filled company that are like trying to weirdly capitalize on the dreams of little girls. Like, even there's a great joke where Mattel gets like a call from the FBI, and the FBI's office looks much nicer and more well decorated than the Mattel office cubicle, which is just great.
It's one of those films where there's so many like factors that just make you question how it exists. I mean, as you're saying, just the overt criticism of the company, and then just the cast that's assembled, and the Greta Gerwig and Noah Baumbach behind it. It's just everything just fits together so well, and it's almost like it just shouldn't be a thing, but somehow the pieces all came together.
A comparison I want to make is so when we were talking about Black Mirror, and we had some real criticisms about the whole Streamberry thing, because it didn't feel like a very authentic way of criticizing Netflix. It just seemed kind of bad, for lack of a better term. I think this would be a really good case study in how to take the piss out of your own intellectual property without it being cringe. Like there's no lie. Like it is taking the mick out of Mattel throughout the whole film. It'll mention stuff like how like all the
they have at
Barbies
least two woman CEOs.
Yeah. No, they had one woman CEO and one woman somewhere
Built on women.
Yeah. But there was this one joke that I did actually find really funny. So when it was this scene about Barbie feeling imperfect and not pretty anymore, and then the narrator is just like, note to editors, Margot Robbie is the wrong casting choice to make this point.
Yes, that was great, especially from, I remember, discourse about this movie beforehand saying that if they try and do a plot point of like, she's not pretty anymore, then Margot Robbie was the wrong choice. So it's like so good. I don't know. It just manages to do it all. But I will say that Margot Robbie was actually a great choice for this movie because she manages to do like the scene so well, because this is actually, when you think about it, like it's quite a difficult character to pull off, because she has to, one, be an absolute idiot, right, because she has no clue about the real world, but two, be extremely like emotional and really able to invest in her emotions, because there's a lot of things where you kind of, it's almost like seeing the world through a child's eyes, but she can understand more of the things that are wrong. So you feel, I don't know, it's like getting a new perspective on the actual world, and that has to come through. So there's some really like powerful emotional scenes, but she also has to just be an absolute idiot who can be very funny in situations as well. But there's great points like where she's genuinely terrified. There's one of my like favorite scenes in the movie is when she's at like a bus stop and there's an older lady sat next to her, and she just says like, "You're so beautiful," and it was like, oh
yeah, that was very wholesome.
That's the you know, it's the woman that the Barbie doll was actually based on. Is the daughter of.
I thought it was. It felt like it was supposed to be someone important, but I didn't.
Yeah, I just think Margot Robbie and Ryan Gosling were just such great fits, because they're both, they're both very talented actors in their own right, and they do obviously have a catalogue of more serious roles, but in this they just fully went for it, and they managed to really balance those more emotional moments with just making a fool of themselves, basically. I just think they were both just so brilliant.
They did, yeah. They were both. You go.
The moments of Ryan Gosling making an absolute complete fool of himself as well is so good. Like, there's so many scenes of him just looking for horses, or my fave when he's doing the classic guitar song by Campfire is great. And my favorite Ken moment in this is when he's instated the Kendom. He's converted the Barbie dream house into Ken's Mojo Dojo Casa house, and Barbie comes over and asks if he's interested in hanging out a bit, and then he just goes around the corner and goes, "Sublime!"
Sublime!
That was really funny. I really enjoyed that.
That was a very good joke. It was quality.
It was.
But I think the whole point of the characters, they do start off being the sort of brain dead dolls living in the perfect day perpetually. That's all of their character arcs start there, and then Barbie and Ken go into the real world, and that's when the paths start to differ. Because the Barbieland was sort of this, I guess kind of matriarchal, but the whole point of it was feminism won. It sorted everything, every problem's fixed. And then they go into the real world, and it's, as you say, it's sort of experiencing the real world through a child's eyes. And it's like, oh, women aren't in positions of power, and women are it's just not as easy to be a woman in the real world. And meanwhile, Ken, his impressions are just like, oh my god, I can be a CEO, I can ride a horse, I can do this, I can ride a horse, I can ride a horse.
I think what was especially interesting about Barbieland as well is it wasn't just that the matriarchy was kind of self-contained within that. They also were under this false pretense that the Barbie brand had sort of brought that into the real world, because even though there's that scene
it wasn't
where
just feminism, it was
young
Barbie.
girls, because there's that scene obviously where the young girls complain about the ideas of the these unrealistic beauty standards and stuff that's associated with Barbie dolls now. But as it said at the start, when that sort of did first get released, it was relatively progressive in that it offered an alternative to just strictly maternal roles through children's toys for girls. So I thought that was an interesting parallel. But what I'm glad is that they didn't spend. I didn't feel like they spent too long in the real world, because some of the trailers and stuff, it did look like it was going to be sort of a Lego movie style thing where a lot of the focus is them going there. But it took up a decent chunk of the time. But I like that the focus was more so on Barbieland and how it spread over to there in the second half.
Yeah, it was more the parallel of the real world and how it differs from Barbieland, and the main plot was still about how Barbies and Kens are going to, take what they've learned from the real world and apply it to their own, and I think both Barbies and Kens do make mistakes. So I mean, Ken's obviously a lot more so, because what happens is they come back from the real world and Ken's just completely taken over, gone and made it all sort of man den type things and taken over everything. And then the Barbies sort of take over back from the Kens by making them fight each other with this amusing musical number, I'm Just Ken, which was brilliant. But then after that, it seems like the Barbies are just going to go back to exactly how they were before, and the Kens are just going to be sort of the accessory attached always to Barbies. And there's that leads into my one sort of criticism, but I don't know if you want to have anything else to say first, about sort of the way that Ken's they're told to go and find themselves. So it's the Barbies realize that everything wasn't as perfect as it was to begin with, and they kind of
The thing is, ultimately, you do have that return to the status quo at the end in Barbieland, and even more so, it feels like it's been even stricter imposition a bit, where the Kens are initially more lost, but then I guess there is that liberating aspect where they kind of are free to find their own identity and stuff. So,
but they are homeless,
I guess. Yeah, well, that's the thing, that there is the issue of that, where it's not really like anything has progressed as such. But when you kind of, you have to go into this taking it as a satire. So I think that I don't know. It didn't really. The one thing that annoyed me more than that, I'd say, was how in the first half you do have all the parody and stuff of Mattel, and how the business people are the big bad, and all this, as you're saying, the jokes about how it's kind of corrupt and very masculine. But then throughout the course of the film, their role like massively diminishes to the point where because the focus has been shifted on Ken, which makes sense, they're kind of forgotten about, and then almost they come along, and when they finally arrive in Barbieland, it's like everything's forgotten and it's fine again. So I feel like in that respect, it kind of there's more of a surface level critique where, obviously this is a satire and it did work that way, but it is still a product that is being promoted. So I feel like that kind of lost a bit of steam in the second half. I don't know about you.
Yeah, this leads on to my fundamental criticism of Barbie is that it is obviously trying to be a satire and lampooning stuff, but the problem is that by centering the focus of being Barbie as the protagonist means that when Barbie the protagonist is redeemed, because obviously that was going to happen, the product as well must be redeemed. So it's like whatever message it sends, whether they're learning things, that's then definitely being like reflected in the product. Like they're selling the ordinary Barbies that are mentioned at the end, which is like Will Ferrell agrees to do as the weird evil businessman, but they are also doing that, and they kind of just decide that Barbie's not like got problems anymore. So I think that it has that problem of it still at the end has to sell Barbies, and even if it didn't want to, it clearly wanted to have Barbie go on this arc, and by having this arc, it will lead to, it is in and of itself a promotion. And there is one other separate point about it not like truly being like doing its point of this feminist point, which I think is that at the end there's a moment of where she's trying to make things right with Ken, where he like is constantly coming on to Barbie, where she's trying to be like, oh yeah, let's make up and be friends now, and then Ken just like keeps trying to like kiss her and stuff, but she just kind of puts up with it and doesn't really do anything. And it's like, and it feels like the message when everything returns to the status quo is like, just put up with sexism. And that felt a bit weird, like it couldn't properly deal with that.
I didn't necessarily interpret it as...
Oh, you go.
Okay. I didn't necessarily interpret it as that. I mean, it was more sort of just... I think the whole point of Ken was he was always just Barbie's boyfriend, and that was how he was defined, which in a sense kind of mirrors how women used to be treated in the real world. Like, you weren't your own person, you were just
definitely
an accessory to a man. And then at the end it's like, oh, you can go out and you don't no longer have to be an accessory. And I think that was more sort of Ken slipping out, sort of just going back to his old habits. But I could be reading that wrong.
No, I think that's what they were trying to do, but it didn't necessarily
come across that way.
There was none of the pushback about like, you don't need to do this. She was just like, whatever.
Yeah,
that was
it was more just how he kind of
bit.
figured out after 2 attempts. He was like, oh, okay. And she's just like,
yeah,
no.
The thing is, I think I definitely agree that in both that feminist angle and also the whole big corporation thing, that it was definitely restricted by it still having to, be a promotion of a product ultimately. But I think that would be more of an issue for me if the rest of the film didn't sort of nail the tone and the humor and stuff. And even that scene towards the end where you have the sequence with the Billie Eilish song where it's like flashing between all these different women and with the dolls and stuff. It was quite cheesy and emotionally manipulative, but it just kind of got to me in a weird way. I don't know. I think
I get that.
In some sense, you kind of have to separate the criticisms that are almost beyond the film itself. It's like just the idea of making the Barbie film. You're going to get entangled in that kind of stuff, and then you have to look at like the actual execution. And I think that execution was good enough where it obviously didn't eliminate the those issues, but it definitely made it like less prominent. If it didn't nail some of the more emotional and the comedic moments, then I definitely think that would bump it down more for me. But ultimately, I didn't mind as much.
Yeah, I get that. I mean, you do just kind of have to go into it in that it's both, it's meant to be a bit of silly fun, but with a resonant message, and I think it absolutely achieves that goal. I mean, it's just a very fun film to watch. I mean, I'm sure all ages would enjoy watching it. Not just the probably key demographic of sort of young to mid teenage girls, but it did also leave a message resonating. And I mean, as a man, it did leave me thinking a bit more about how women are treated in like modern society and everything. It's not the definitive angle of feminism, but it's enough to. I feel like it would be enough to leave young girls feeling like they're valid and they can do their own thing, and it gets the message across, is what I'm trying to say.
It does, and there is obviously the key defining moment with the big speech, which is, I imagine, would be empowering for younger audiences, even if you don't fully understand all the intricacies of the plot. But one thing that I was really curious about going into this was kind of what the intended age and audience was. And do you think this?
Yeah.
Because for me, I thought some of it would have probably gone over the heads, or like maybe it was a bit too mature for younger audiences.
I think so, but I think that you can also just appreciate all of the jokes, the like visuals, which are so fun, and the music. I think it's one that anyone can go watch, but not necessarily everyone is going to get everything from it. But I think that anyone can enjoy it.
Yeah, there's bits in there for everyone. By putting bits in for everyone, there'll be bits that don't resonate with certain people. So like, the empowering speech at the end did leave me feeling a bit like, oh damn, that's cool. That's a good empowering message. But like for a younger girl, it might genuinely be a really impactful speech that really does emotionally hit someone. But equally, a younger girl might not get some of the innuendos and stuff, and parents might not enjoy the I don't know, like the opening sequence of everything being perfect in Barbieland as much. They might doze off a little bit before it gets into them. So it gets into the rest of the film. It's like there's definitely stuff in there for everyone. It's just it doesn't make it a cinematic masterpiece for everyone. Speaking of cinema, there were. I'll quickly mention this. There were a few references, like visual references to some famous movies. So the start.
Keep your eye out.
The start of the film referenced our highest rated movie of all time. Thom gave a 10, didn't you? Does that impact your review of Barbie at all?
Reference. I didn't really spot that. It was quite subtle.
Did you not?
It was quite subtle.
It's quite a subtle one.
Yeah, I mean, I think there might have been a little bit of something in the music.
No, I was so happy. I was like, I genuinely, it looked so similar to it. And then the match cut, I was like, yes.
Yeah.
But before we get too carried away, we've got a whole other movie to review.
Right. Well, editor's note. We recorded the episode last night, and then I don't know. It felt kind of one-sided, and that was a lot more apparent after talking to you. So
yeah, because we were calling after the episode, and I was giving my takes on Barbie.
So without further ado, I'm going to introduce you to our second ever special guest.
Extra special guest.
Yeah, you demoted Thom. You're just guest now. So we've got a resident Barbie expert in Ariana who has watched more than one Barbie movie.
I've watched at least 5.
That's quite a few.
Yeah. Well, I think Barbie's actually a really interesting film because it was actually very emotionally resonant for me. I actually liked Barbie way more than I liked Oppenheimer. I think it's way more applicable to me than it would have been to you guys because I think it has a really good exploration of girlhood and the move from girlhood into womanhood. I mean, like, I'm not personally into womanhood, like, obviously, because I'm non-binary, but, like, you know, it's still proximity, and I was talking to my mum, she had the same sort of ideas. We both saw it as a coming-of-age story, where, so, like, obviously Barbie, at the start of the film, she's in Barbieland, it's childish, it's pink, it's silly, it's playing pretend, and there's not a lot of differences between Ken and Barbie dolls, except from, like, superficial outsides. Like, they joke in the film that Barbie and Ken don't have genitals, but, like, as a child, you're kind of genderless and sexist in that way, other than, like, silly stereotypical markers. Realistically, there's not that much difference between you as children. And then, obviously, what starts the film off into its, like, turn into plot is Barbie is having problems because her body is changing, getting cellulite, her feet are going flat. She realises how difficult it is to wear heels and, like, how uncomfortable they are and how uncomfortable she is in the clothing she's wearing. And I feel like it's a really good metaphor for, like, or, like, allusion to, like, your, like, girlhood being ripped away from you when you start, like, going through puberty. She goes into the real world. Ken starts treating her differently because he's getting exposed to all these ideas about, like, patriarchy and sexism and horses, obviously. And also the men already there who are adults are starting to sexualise her in a way she doesn't understand quite a lot. So, like, quite similar to how a lot of young girls suddenly get catcalled in the streets when they're about 12, 13, 14. And they're confused, they don't understand. Places they would have felt safe before, things that felt safe to wear no longer feel safe to wear. And she's confused by the world, how the world's interacting with her. And then I think the rest of the film is, like, a lot of it is about reclaiming womanhood and girlhood. Like, for the mother, she's reclaiming bits of her girlhood that she had to throw away to be a mum, to be a good mother and a good wife, and to be, like, a good woman. Like, she brings out the fact that she actually knows how to, like, basically do stunt driving.
Yeah.
That she got from, like, an old boyfriend. And, like, she gets to reclaim a lot of her youth whilst also, like, being herself and being a woman and reclaiming her womanhood and girlhood. And for her daughter, she's completely rejected the idea of femininity. She's like, it's stupid, it's dumb, Barbie's dumb. And, like, Barbie's a bit dumb. I've got complaints about Barbie as a brand and Mattel as a company. Obviously, they're terrible. But, like, I think it's a really good encapsulation of, like, how I felt as a teenager. Like, giving up all feminine things I like, and her journey over the film to reclaim some aspects of that, where she starts wearing pink, she repairs her relationship with her mother, and, like, she gets to be like, I can be a person and intelligent and also be a woman.
Yeah.
And I think it's especially clear with Barbie, where, like, obviously Barbie, I said before, is kind of like an encapsulation of, like, a childish idea of womanhood and femininity. Like, you know, she's, like, told that girls run the world now, you can be anything you want to be. It's all really girl power, which is a lot of things I got told a lot when I was, like, a young child. And, like, her disconnect, seeing how the world actually is compared to what she was told, is really upsetting and jarring for her. And I think this is when, like, the Matrix scene comes into play, because she gets given the two shoes, obviously, the pink heel and the brown sandal, and she wants to, like, ignore the real world. She wants to continue, like, with her, like, view of the world, girl power, very naive look at femininity and, like, feminism. But when she's thrust into the real world and, like, she has to fix Barbieland, she comes to learn about herself and, like, realise she doesn't have to be a perfect Barbie. She doesn't have to encapsulate the perfect idea of womanhood, femininity, to be real and herself. She can be who she wants to be. And I think with the accepting of, like, at the end scene where she's going into the gynecologist's office and they specifically show her wearing pink sandals, I think it's a really good, like, imagery of like her being like rejecting like the idea that she has to be perfect and feminine, but also being able to keep the aspects that she likes with her, and she doesn't have to completely give it up.
She could be sandal-pilled and pink.
Yeah, she could be sandal-pilled and pink. And like, I think the gynecologist's office is really funny, obviously. Like, because she obviously thinks she's going into a job interview, she's going to her first day at work.
Super excited
and then she's super excited to be a gynecologist. But it's like I was saying before, where Barbie was like, before she's a child and sexless, and she doesn't want to be like, she doesn't want to go into the real world. She wants to stay in her little bubble of like childlike wonder. And like at the end where she's so excited to like have genitalia and go to the gynecologist's office, it's like a showing her acceptance of adulthood and womanhood. If you're looking at it through obviously a reading of a coming of age story. But I think it's a really interesting film about how girlhood and womanhood interact, especially with like obviously what I just said, and like the intergenerational dynamic between the mother and a daughter.
Yeah, that was a really interesting sort of mirror to Barbie's own journey. You don't necessarily get the full closure of how the daughter's going to be, but you kind of see her at the start of the film. She's sort of rejecting like
very not like the other girls.
Yeah, but rejecting like the childish Barbie dolls, and Barbie's bad and everything.
Yeah, especially when Barbie in their relationship is a kind of a image of like connection for them. Like they played Barbies together when she was little. When she rejected Barbie, she rejected her mother.
Yeah, she wanted to be her own person at that point.
Plus, I also found like the scenes of her playing with her mother with Barbies really emotional personally, because of how I used to play with my mother. Like I think it's a very resonant film for people experiencing girlhood and or womanhood.
Yeah, and that's why I wanted to have you on, because it's you've got a completely different take on the film.
Yeah, my mum's obsessed with it. Like she didn't cry during it. She's not a crier, but like she was just like
it just impacted her.
It was she thinks it's an amazing film. She thinks it's stupid, it's silly, it's emotionally impactful, and really has a lot of things to say, which I think maybe have gone over some people's heads if they weren't experiencing the things that like are kind of alluded to in the film, because it's not spelled out explicitly.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, also just like I can't stop thinking about "I'm Just Ken," the song. We've been singing it all morning, literally all morning.
Well, that's one of the things. You can go watch the rest of the episode now, so goodbye. But unfortunately, you won't get any review of the Barbie soundtrack this week.
Yeah.
Spoilers.
If you want my review of Oppenheimer, not great. I thought it was kind of boring. But
okay.
I couldn't tell. I couldn't tell what I said half the time.
We've got a whole other movie to review.
Are we going to do the Barbie rating or do them both at the end?
I think
I was going to go.
Oh no!
I was going to do them one at
Barbie
a time.
rating now,
but then
have
a quick discussion at the end of Barbenheimer as a whole experience. So
sure, okay. Let's give. Yes, okay. Barbie rating. I had such a fun time. Go and watch this. It's very funny jokes and some really good themes. I just think that at the end it kind of fizzled out a bit for me, which is where this is coming down. So I'm giving it a 7 out of 10, just to make that clear.
That is
7.00 out of Ken.
Nice. I also it's just, I mean, if you want to be more cynical, we can let some of the issues that we discussed bother you more. But I think in terms of just its enjoyability, it really nailed it. I'm 7.3. Respectable 7.3 out of 10.
Yeah.
Well, you see, I would personally rate this. Barbie out of 10, which in numerical value is 7.3. I'll go with that. It was fun. It was good. I had a great time watching it. I'm sure it will hold up very well rewatch wise. But like it's not quite the level of some of the other films we've seen. So sorry, Barbie stans, you can come and kill me if you want, but I will stand by this rating.
Speaking of death.
Ooh, no, that's a transition right
good
there.
Segue.
Speaking of death.
Yeah, do I need to do the plot?
Yeah.
So I think people know. It happened. It's history.
Yeah, but also there's stuff with interspersed with a hearing about his security clearance being renewed and Robert Downey Jr. being confirmed for some political position which I've forgotten. So that's all you need to know, really.
Yeah.
But this was incredible. Like I was excited for this film, but damn, it was so good.
It really was.
I don't really know what to say. I was just sat there like jaw agape, looking at Cillian Murphy's face, absolutely just filling the screen with such a good performance. Like it starts off, I wasn't sure about how it would go at the start, but the kind of frenetic pace at the start really does well this like whirlwind of how where the scientific community was in at the time, like the start of the quantum physics movement, and also him just hopping all over the place trying to find his place and sort out the way he saw the universe. And then it gets into the program, and you can easily see how he just got into it by like this thing of, well, we need to beat the Nazis, they can't get this first, and all these things. And there's so much stuff. The Trinity test, like the full like however long that just pure silent bit was, everyone in the cinema
that was just incredible.
Silent watching the test. Yeah, and then the noise hits you and you're like, whoa. The scene, there's so many good stuff.
Discussed this quite briefly with Ben, but about the start, because maybe it was because we actually missed the very start, unfortunately, and also obviously it was just coming from Barbie, but it took me a little bit of time to get into it and sort of adjust to that, the fast pace. But Ben said you like were into it straight away, right?
Yeah, I was. It was an interesting one because I kind of want to watch what we missed at the start, but my guess it was just mainly the introduction to the hearing. I personally found the pacing.
The start, I feel like I should mention something about the start because it's quite important. It starts with a quote about Prometheus, where it says,
"Yeah, I've heard that.
Prometheus took fire from the gods and gave it to man, and for this he was punished for eternity," or something like that.
Yeah, but I think the pacing of this movie was just incredible. It had, as you said, it had a very frenetic pace. It was it felt like it was moving very fast throughout most of the film, apart from I think the last half hour. But that's 2.5 hours that did not feel like 2.5 hours to me. It felt like it was going a lot quicker than you'd think. Because I'm just thinking of
the same length as Barbie.
Yeah, Nolan has such a skill of just making these long films just fly by. I think, as you say, it was kind of the last hour for me that I felt it dragged slightly, but just how frantic with all the interspersed footage of, bombs and stuff throughout the first part.
And the fact that the music didn't go away, it was always kind of present, which I think is a feature in like a lot of Nolan films. But that constant propelling from the music and the scenes all being fairly short to start with, and the intercuts with the I think they were all practical effects of like atoms and bombs and stuff like that. It was just an incredible example of pacing. It's and it was not just paced well. It was very Nolan. It was a very unique style that I personally just love.
I just all his films are so distinctly him, and I think this is actually the first one I've seen on the big screen, and it just elevates it to a whole nother level with, as you say, the constant lingering score that you almost forget is there, but it really does wonders in building the tension, and you never feel like you get a release of it. And then
the release comes with the Trinity test.
I can't believe it ripped off 2001 though, with the breathing and silence.
Yeah. That was just, I don't know if Thom saw it in IMAX. It's one you should definitely see in IMAX. It was just really cool. And there's I can't really explain just how good that tension before the bomb goes off was. You could hear a pin drop. I mean, I cracked my knuckles, so you could hear that in the cinema. They cracked my knuckles, and it's just silent, and it lingers a lot longer than you think it will, and you're like, oh, when's it gonna hit? When's it gonna hit? When's it gonna hit?
I know, because that moment, I think what was quite interesting is, I mean, I went into this obviously expecting a lot of it to focus on the guilt weighing on him about the whole atomic, obviously the benefits in terms of ending the war, but then the mass destruction and all that weighing on him, which does occupy, the first kind of two acts. But I feel like that kind of cuts off at the test, and then you get this kind of shift in the third act where it's more so deconstruction of his ideological leanings, and that stuff I thought was equally interesting because and also cleverly done with all the black and white objective and subjective stuff and the Strauss stuff. And I've got to say, I mean, Inception springs to mind as having a brilliant ending, but I think this might actually be my favourite Nolan ending, just because it wasn't like it was doing much, but just that when you see, well, first of all, when the guy says to Strauss, they were probably talking about something more important, you kind of see him realise that he's just a footnote in history. And then you see the actual conversation with Einstein, and it's on the talking about how they have created the ripple, but it's not, obviously not the physical thing. It's the repercussion it's had, and I mean, even just thinking about the relevance of that through to today, it was just so powerful, and I think it perfectly encapsulated the whole what he was going for throughout the whole film. It just left me in awe, that ending. It's incredible.
Yeah, that ending was incredible. I was thinking of, I remember seeing the interviews where it was saying Christopher Nolan says people leave the theatre unable to speak, and I was like, that sounds a bit dramatic.
That sounds like a clickbait Watch Mojo.
Yeah. And then the ending happened, I was like, oh no.
In some of the articles I'd seen about this, I'd seen how they were describing it as having aspects of horror, and I was kind of interested because the first couple acts, mainly, with some exceptions, were mainly sort of your standard. I mean, obviously in Nolan's own very unique style, it was kind of your standard biopic type thing, where it's kind of like a theory of everything, or the one with Benedict Cumberbatch about Turing.
Imitation Game.
Imitation Game, yeah, but where it's kind of just following the main character's journey to where he's famous, what he did came about. But the horror aspects really came in with, I think, this sort of displays of of guilt and like it almost felt like, you know, anxiety attacks, the way and it was very sparingly used, but for example, that scene after the bomb goes off where he's delivering a speech and you've just got all of the feet stomping and then it cuts to like what people would look like if they'd been in the blast, like not directly in the radius, of skin peeling and crumbling, and that was just fantastic. And and just the way that was used, and there was also this scene with where I've lost my point now. Someone say something.
My favorite part of this, I think, was the way it did the unconventional blending of, like, I've not really seen this in Nolan films, especially not when it's supposed to be like very grounded, where it has this blending of like almost this subconscious creeping in, where a lot of times you like the feet banging on the deck comes up lots of times in just normal conversation, and the like delayed explosion noise creeping in different places where his mind's like fighting against him, and those kind of surreal elements, like during delivering the speech, which is absolutely incredible, where suddenly it just flashes white and you can't see anyone's faces, and as we said, and then as he's leaving he steps in this like ashen corpse, and then other surreal elements, one which I think a lot of people didn't like, which I can see why, but the scene where he's talking about the final night that he saw Jean, Florence Pugh's character, and he's in the hearing, and then like suddenly
that was my point. I forgot.
Completely nude. Yeah, because he's like being exposed in front of everyone, which I actually really liked, because if that hadn't happened, because of the kind of character he was, I would have assumed he was kind of coldly retelling it, like without maybe a bit of regret but not much emotion. But from that visual, it was like so clearly he was so exposed. And then you also when it cuts to like Kitty's point of view, you then get Florence Pugh. Yeah, you then get Florence Pugh on top of him, like she's being forced to relive this moment, so it's like viscerally painful for her. But those kind of strange, surreal choices will like really bring this film together, and there's so many little points like that just build and show Oppenheimer's like crumbling mental state, and this weighing guilt, while also not relieving him of responsibility. That it's still very clear that he is responsible for a lot of this death. Like there's the whole point of Jean, Florence Pugh's character, is like this mirroring of the bomb, which does lead to my least favorite scene by far in the film, which we'll get to. But it has the whole thing of him indulging in this affair and then leading to her eventual destruction. But his wife Kitty, which a great performance by Emily Blunt, saying like, you can't commit the sin and then make us feel sorry for you. Like this is your fault, and like while it is upsetting, you can't make us just be like, oh no, poor Oppenheimer, which I think it did really well at all of that.
The thing is,
really poignant.
Often with with biopics, you often wonder like how much does just that, how interesting the actual real life events were, how much does that kind of carry the film. But obviously there is the craft of like capturing that, and I think coming after, especially Tenet, it was almost as if, what's Nolan going to kind of do to elevate the story even more? Of a person who, although has arguably had one of the biggest effects in modern history, is not necessarily forgotten time, but I don't think he's quite got, the general public probably aren't as knowledgeable about the kind of stuff that's presented in this film as perhaps some other key figures from the 20th century. So I think it was really an interesting choice of characters. And also, I think even if, he played around with the timeline and the black and white stuff, but I think the two things that are really solidified as one of the greatest was Cillian Murphy's performance, which, just towards the end where he sat and these people who you see throughout the course of the film are coming and offering their stories about him and stuff, and then you like see how he's almost accepted this kind of the guilt, and when he then decides to shake Benny Safdie's character's hand, it's like he's almost come to terms with it to the point where it's almost like too immense for him to deny. And then the other side is just, as you say, all the visual tricks, and also that moment where towards the end where he's in the hearing room and the guy's kind of getting more and more aggressive, and then again you get that build up of the white, and just all like moments were really what just made this, I think, the best possible thing it could have been with what it was dealing with. It was just, I had my doubts going in, but it just ticked all the boxes perfectly.
I did like the fact that it wasn't a just one-sided propaganda piece in favor of Oppenheimer. It did very much show his intentions and his philosophies, but it didn't sort of forgive him on its own. It very much left it up to you, the viewer. But it did also tell the other side of the story of his credibility basically being just torn apart piece by piece with the whole Red Scare thing. So he'd had. The thing was, he was never a Communist Party member himself, but he'd sent money to causes like the Spanish Civil War through the Communist Party, and Jean, his ex-wife, was a party member. His brother was a party member, and all of these sort of ties and affiliations with the Communist Party, obviously in late 40s, early 50s America, would just straight excuses for the government to go, oh, he's not credible, let's just silence him, because he did try and lobby for the control of nuclear weapons, and he did argue against the use of the H-bomb and everything, but it all kind of fell on deaf ears after his credibility was just stripped from him and his security clearance was stripped from him, and I didn't know any of that going into this film. I just knew he was Bomb Man. So
yeah, it was really interesting, the ideological slant, as you were saying, where by conveying all the idea about the Reds' terror and McCarthyism in America, it really pinpointed that we've ended World War II, but we're entering this Cold War, which is a lot more abstract, political. No one really. It's more difficult to get to terms with than just the physical bomb being dropped, because it's more about the potential of these weapons and how it kind of transcends the Americans' power. And I think that's why that final conversation with Einstein, whether on about how this is like blown out of proportion and that kind of domino effect is even more terrifying than like the actual weapon itself.
Yeah, the Pandora's box has been opened, and the world's never going to be the same again.
Exactly.
Yeah, and just before we get on to any criticisms of the film, I will just say this wasn't a criticism in itself, but it did feel. It felt during the last hour. I know the pacing slowed down tremendously after the bomb, and that worked just really well in its favour immediately after, with the foot stomping scene and showing of his guilt. But afterwards, it did kind of feel like the film was ramping up to end 3 or 4 different times and then kept going, which personally I didn't mind, because I think the main thing was after Oppenheimer's story himself had finished. It finished with the Strauss story, and him being revealed as the one who set the cards up for Oppenheimer to take the fall, and him ultimately going down for that. But yeah, it did feel a little bit odd in that. It might be that I didn't see the start, and something in the start would have set this up a little bit better. So I could just be wrong here. But it didn't feel like Strauss's story at all. He very much felt like a side character in the Oppenheimer story. And then once Oppenheimer had finished, he sort of became the side character in his own story, and it was more about the people taking him down, and then ultimately Strauss, and it felt like it was ramping down a few times. So yeah, what did you guys think of that?
I mean, I didn't really notice it ramping down. Like, for me, it got to the Einstein conversation, and then the fact that it had ended was like a kick in the gut. So I'm not sure. Like, for me, because it still obviously had things it was wrapping up, and then by the end, it had wrapped them up. But I was still. It had left that Einstein conversation as the big thing. So when you found
Einstein
out what it actually was that it ended, you're like, oh no, yeah. But I think the Strauss thing was important. It still was about Oppenheimer for me, because it was about it was about why was he taken down? What was this thing really about? And it's this idea of you can take on this mantle of having to become the creator of the biggest and most important death machine the world's ever seen, and then in the end just be tossed aside for someone's political campaign and petty vengeance. Like, for me, I don't know. It's difficult for me to say much, because I just hadn't seen the points where it felt like it should have ended that you did. Like, for me,
I agree.
When it ended, I was like, oh.
I agree with Ben in that I didn't necessarily think it was like ramping down, because even though, you know, the majority of the close is just speaking, and quite well, you know, it lacks the sort of oomph of the first two acts. I did find the shift of focus to Strauss a little bit off-putting at first, because although it's one of those criticisms where I wouldn't really know what Strauss to do differently, because they obviously did set up that stuff throughout the first 2 hours, but a lot of the time I found that the Strauss bits earlier on is more like I was trying to figure out who he was and his relation to Oppenheimer, and then suddenly the perspective. And I get that it's still Oppenheimer's story, obviously, but it does feel like a very sudden shift to me in that last act, where again it was set up earlier, but it was slightly jarring.
I think the whole thing is because it didn't feel like it was from Oppenheimer's point of view, because it was still about him, but acts 1 and 2 were from his point of view, whereas 3 it started off with him post-bomb right up until sort of that conversation with the president, and then after that it was more sort of Strauss, his lawyers, and his wife, I guess, sort of played a big role in, why aren't you defending yourself? Why are you just letting them walk all over you? And
if anything, that's kind of reflective of Oppenheimer retreating because of his guilt. So I did, again, on paper, I think that works really well, but it was kind of weird just seeing him kind of sidelined, and he was present throughout it, but it was like he was kind of stripped of his voice, because he was clearly regretful and felt semi-powerless.
Yeah, I might enjoy it a bit more going back into it. Sort of conceptualizing it like that. It just felt a little bit odd again, because
maybe I think that they do set up both hearings very early on, and it's possible that you missed that and that makes them feel more important. Because I don't know.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah,
it
probably.
felt all important, and because there's a lot of stuff from Strauss's perspective throughout, because everything in black and white is Strauss's perspective. I think so.
I suppose it kind of is.
I don't know.
It might just be that in the scenes from his perspective, Oppenheimer is talking and he is interacting a lot, so it feels more from his point of view, even if it technically wasn't. And then Act 3, he'd been stripped of his voice.
Yeah, but I think that worked for me because he had been stripped of his voice. Like in reality, that was paralleled. As soon as as soon as he left the bomb program, like that was it. The government didn't want anything to do with him. In fact, even after he'd made it, because there's that scene where he says, when Matt Damon's going to Washington, he's like, "Can I go with you?" And Matt Damon's like, "Why?" It's like, that's it. We don't need you anymore. You've made the bomb. See ya.
Yeah.
So it kind of, I don't know, that worked for me. My main criticism is the scene with Florence Pugh where he reads the funny quote while having sex. And I've been holding on to this the whole time we've been doing the review, and I'm like, why did Nolan do that?
I mean, that was kind of funny, actually.
I said the thing, I know it's supposed to be because it's like mirroring the relationship with the bomb, but come on.
Whoa, Florence Pugh is the bomb? Yo.
And that's my least favourite bit.
It was a very odd choice.
She opens the book and is like, "Can you read Sanskrit?" And she opens on the page of the quote
with the funny quote.
And then she says, he says, "I am become death, mounted, destroyer of worlds."
Yeah, I'll tell you what go for there. I don't know if that's just.
It could have, it would have worked better if she'd opened the book, mounted him, and him reading it. He instead read, "It's Oppenheimer in time," and then Oppenheimer's all over her.
I think my brain would have been able to deal with that better.
If the only way I could really defend it is that it does kind of subvert it in that, that's sort of the most famous clip of Oppenheimer is saying that. So you'd probably expect that to be in the film, but Nolan's like, no, I'm kind of gonna
Nolan horn.
Yeah, I get that. And it's the other coin of it as well, where he's saying it as a kind of more of a power thing rather than a regret thing, and I understand all of that, but I don't like it. Yeah. Which, should we rate it on that note?
Yeah, let's go.
We're coming up.
Shall I go first?
Go on.
All right. Well, it's an interesting one because I didn't expect to enjoy it as much as I did, if that makes sense, because I knew going into it was a Nolan movie, and Nolan makes bloody brilliant movies, but I kind of thought it might fall into the same sort of generic biopic tropes, which it didn't really, and just the combination of everything, the pacing, the story, the brilliant performances from the actors, I mean, even down to Cillian Murphy just perfectly nailing the accent and everything. It was just an incredible experience. And watching it in IMAX as well for the first time, that was one hell of an experience. Watching it in the cinema with that moment before the bomb, I mean, I keep referencing that, but it was so impactful. So I'm going to have to go 8.5. Yes, 8.5.
I also didn't expect to enjoy this one as much as I did, especially because Nolan's past two films were Tenet and Dunkirk, which didn't really hit as hard for me. So I was like, I don't know. I was like, maybe I won't really like this one, but I absolutely thoroughly enjoyed it. It was gripping throughout, amazing performances, great music, and really got me thinking. And I don't know, we've talked to people about it for ages afterwards. So I'm going to have to give this an Oppenheimer out of 10.
Oh!
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. It definitely somehow exceeded my expectations. And I'm going to make a point here, which is more so about like the whole Barbenheimer thing, which I found quite interesting. That I don't know if either of you have heard of the Intercut podcast, but one of the hosts of that said that obviously the whole like behind the scenes things about the Barbenheimer coinciding releases was that it was with Tenet especially, right, where he'd been with Warner Brothers the majority of his career, and they kind of screwed him over where they released that is like the date thing, and he like kind of left the company on bad terms, and then they, well, I don't know, this is probably a conscious choice, but like releasing Barbie on the same day, which I don't know if he was particularly happy about, but if anything, it's kind of worked in both of their favours. But I think it is interesting that in the context of this, obviously the scopes are entirely different, but making a biopic about someone developing something and then it kind of being misused by others, and then like the ramifications of that, where he's kind of having to deal with the consequences of stuff that's kind of gone outside of his control. I don't know if there's some parallel there between Oppenheimer's experience and what's happened with Nolan, but I think that's like an interesting point in terms of like the context of the release. But anyway, I'm gonna review this with the Oppenheimer cigarette in my mouth and give it 8.6.
Ooh.
Oh, cheeky! Wow. Well,
I'm not actually rethinking mine. Because it has been, I think, one of the movies I've enjoyed most in as long as I can remember. So I think I might have been a bit harsh. I'm gonna go 8.8.
Oh,
wow.
Not quite an Oppenheimer.
Read the IMDb score.
Oh no, so-called free thinkers quoting the IMDb score. But yeah, I'd agree with that. Yeah, there were a couple of small criticisms I had, but
at least we know you've been influenced by the big capitalist corporations, so you're not communist.
That is good, yeah. Otherwise, you won't have to kick me off the podcast.
Exactly. You definitely want to have your security clearance.
It's my security clearance being an entry ticket to a film.
Yeah. Well,
cool.
Should we briefly give our thoughts about the Barbenheimer experience?
Barbie first, Oppenheimer second. Anyone who says anything else is just stupid.
Okay, well, I'm going to hold my tongue on that. But I will say that I was actually so happy that this happened because, one, I doubt I would have seen Barbie without Barbenheimer, and I really enjoyed Barbie, so I was glad that I saw it. Two, if I did watch Barbie, it would have probably been like the week after when I heard good things, which would have meant that I missed out on watching both Barbie and Oppenheimer in absolutely packed cinemas. Like, I think they genuinely had both been sold out for me, and watching both of those movies with fully packed audiences did so much. Especially in the Barbie screening, there were loads of people dressed up as well. Like, the vibes were so good, making this like a big double bill event, like a day out with a bunch of friends, and experiencing these two movies with loads of other people. Like, it's so fun. Go to the cinema and watch both of them.
Yeah,
how many spread them out.
How many people were dressed up as Oppenheimer at your screens?
Oppenheimer. I don't think I actually saw any Oppenheimers for me.
See, that was interesting because our friend group was split pretty much down the middle. We had 3 Oppenheimers and 3 Barbies, and then we had a 7th person join who came and combined both aesthetics. But we only spotted one more guy dressed as Oppenheimer in the screenings. But as you say, it was opening weekend, and both were packed, and it was a really fun day out. It was great to see, great excuse to see friends, and everyone got dressed up, and it was just really fun. And I joke a bit about having Barbie first and then Oppenheimer second, and now that's better. But I do genuinely think that was better because Barbie was such a fun introduction. It was just a good vibe. It was really, really nice. Gets you into the mood. And then Oppenheimer is very impactful and leaves you thinking more. And we came out of the cinema having watched both pretty much back to back. We had, I think, about 10-15 minute break between them, and it was just great. It was one of the best experiences in the cinema I've had possibly in my entire life. I mean,
it is just great how it seems to have unified a lot of people that maybe not, as you say, might not have seen one or even either of these films, but it's almost like it's the thing to do, especially this weekend. And I just hope like something like this happens at some point soon, because it was just elevated both the films, just having the experience. I think if possible in future, cinemas should do all they can to promote this kind of stuff, and studios should as well. I mean, obviously we have the whole thing with Sony being tricked into re-releasing Morbius in cinema, so maybe they shouldn't always listen to audiences. But in terms of this, then I think it's a good message.
It was just really wholesome.
Worry, Ollie. They're already doing Saw Patrol, where Saw X and Paw Patrol are being released on the same day. But I think that one thing that I hope comes of this is not the double release date thing, because that'll become a bit corporate and trite. But I would love to see double features of cinemas running like old movies in conjunction with each other. Like a lot of independent local cinemas do this. Like, in fact, mine was doing Nolan and Gerwig films, like one of each every week. Like there was Lady Bird versus Interstellar, and there was Little Women versus Dunkirk and stuff every week. And I hope that more cinemas start doing this, because one of my other like really good cinema experiences recently was another double bill, but it was 2 David Lynch movies. It was Blue Velvet and then Mulholland Drive, which I'm glad were in that order. Which, thinking back on it, that's basically Barbie then Oppenheimer in terms of vibes.
I agree. I don't necessarily think it's we should get the same release date, but I just mean in terms of cinemas grouping stuff together. And even, I mean, as you say, you could go 2 ways about it. You could do 2 like thematically similar films, or do a Barbenheimer and have like 2 completely contrasting stuff, which I think in most cases would work a lot better.
I think the main thing, rather than the fact it was 2 films back to back, at least for me, was the fact that it felt very wholesome, and that it was a coming together of all sorts of different demographics who wouldn't necessarily have seen the other film. It's like, you've got the film nerds like us who are off to circle jerk about Oppenheimer, but then we watched Barbie and actually really enjoyed it. It was a very good film.
Yeah, and we were represented in Barbie as well. Do you remember the Godfather bit?
That's
the
true.
EV representation.
Yeah. But then we also had people who were interested in the Barbie movie. I mean, even in our own friend group, I noticed there was some people going for Oppenheimer, some people going for Barbie, but everyone came out sort of enjoying both films, even if they had a preference. And in the cinema, you just saw all sorts of people. I mean, again, there weren't actually very many kids in the Barbie screening, but there were everyone's there. A lot of people are dressed up. It was really fun. I agree. I wouldn't want to see double bill releases on everything because it would just become another like overused thing, like the cinematic universe thing that's going on with. I mean, a lot of properties now and whatever. But yeah, it was great. It was fun. It was cool, and we all had a good time.
Yeah, we did.
Cool.
Should we wrap up the episode?
Yeah, before we do, I just want to quickly say we don't have a submission spotlight this week, and if we did, we probably wouldn't have done one because this has been going on for a while. But please do get in touch if you've got anything you want us to review, any kind of media, short films, books, music, art, I don't know, anything you could class as entertainment. If you've got a podcast, that would be cool, just anything. One thing I did find, so I was cleaning out the E of E inbox the other day, and I've noticed we did actually get one submission spotlight during our hiatus last year, and it was like an independent film from Guernsey, and we were invited to like the premiere and everything with free tickets and subsidized accommodation, and we didn't bloody see it. So if you're a film studio and you want us to invite us to a premiere, we're all ready now, please.
Yeah,
the inbox is all fresh. You can send us, please do it.
Yes, and also follow us on TikTok and Instagram.